Huggy Wuggy was the very first antagonist we faced in Poppy Playtime. Now, after 3 long years, he has finally returned, seemingly out for revenge after we sent him plummeting into the depths of Playtime Co. But what if I told you his intentions might not be as sinister as they seem? After spending hours gathering evidence, I've put together some wild theories that might just reveal how Huggy is actually planning on saving us in Chapter 5. To begin with, there's an intriguing note from Chapter 4 that contains a poem. On felted feet and with bated breath, sleep draws ever near. Over paths turning clear, but I'm not afraid of death, for we have already met. This mysterious message was first discovered in Chapter 4's ARG and appears to be referencing Huggy Wuggy himself. The bated breath in question could imply that Huggy is waiting for the right moment, possibly seeking justice for what we did to him, or maybe he's desperate to get to the player for an entirely different reason. Of course, considering his past behavior, it would be easy to assume that he still has a habit of devouring people. So let's say Chapter 5 includes yet another classic Huggy chase scene where we are forced to run for our life from the Blue Beast. But instead of it ending with him finally claiming his revenge, what if it takes an unexpected turn? Imagine he accidentally saves us in the long run, perhaps lunging towards us at full speed only for something to get in his way, like maybe a falling rock for instance. If not for Huggy's interference, it would have landed on us instead. Plus, this would be a neat callback to when the storage box fell on him back in Chapter 1. A nice little bit of fan service. In the end, Huggy may end up dying once and for all, blinded by his anger toward the player, making the poem's mention of not fearing death all the more fitting. If it is referring to him, that is. Now, while this theory is compelling, there isn't enough concrete evidence to fully support it. So, let's start fresh and take a closer look at more pieces of the puzzle to arrive at a deeper and much more probable conclusion. Of course, we can't forget that Huggy Wuggy relentlessly stalked us throughout the events of Chapter 1, only to finally ambush us in an attempt to maul us to pieces, but technically, a significant amount of time has passed since then. Probably a good few hours before he appears again in the lab entrance in Chapter 4. What if, in that time, something changed within Huggy Wuggy? What if his motivations have shifted? Now, I know what you're thinking. There's clear anger being shown from him at the end of Chapter 4, pounding against the door as if he was trying to break through and finish us off for good.
If I were you, I'd start running.
But what if that rage was nothing more than an act? What if Huggy was being watched, forced to display aggression under the control of the prototype? We already know that this powerful entity possesses the ability to telepathically manipulate other toys. In fact, it's entirely possible that the prototype was the one who influenced Huggy to escape the factory back when it was still operational, using him as a pawn in an attempt to rebel against the company. Now, while the Doctor states in the first Story So Far video on Mob Entertainment's YouTube that Huggy's initial hostility was merely a result of his role as a security guard, there might be far more to the story than we've been led to believe.
Our intruder stirred one of the factory's security measures, and he performed exactly as he was designed.
This may not have been the actual reason for Huggy's violent display. The true reason could have very well been that he was simply following the prototype's orders to avoid suffering a worse fate himself. This pattern is not unfamiliar, as we've seen the prototype manipulate others before, such as Catnap, who was ultimately turned into a loyal guardian. If this is true, then Chapter 5 could start with a shocking twist. Huggy Wuggy might actually assist us. After all, he might have come to understand that we only acted in self-defense back in Chapter 1, and with a much greater threat looming over the factory, petty revenge would no longer be a priority. For additional proof, let's consider the game's design. It wouldn't make much sense for a new chapter to kick off with a chase sequence if there are no immediate exits available, especially given how Chapter 4 concluded with us being locked in a room with seemingly no way out. This further implies that Huggy might not be an immediate threat in Chapter 5. In fact, rather than being our enemy right away, there's a chance he could actually assist us in escaping instead. But why would Huggy turn against the prototype in the first place, especially if we assume that he was under the prototype's command in the first chapter? Well, one possible answer lies in the events of Chapter 3 when Kissy Missy was ambushed.
We're coming! Just hold on! Come on, go faster! Kissy!
Kissy is Huggy's spouse, as confirmed in the orientation book. He definitely would not be pleased with the prototype if he was the one responsible for harming Huggy's partner, which most certainly is a possibility, or it may not even be that deep and Huggy could just simply be enraged by the fact that following the prototype's orders ultimately led to his own suffering. We all saw how much blood he lost during his brutal fall, and he appears visibly injured when we see him again in Chapter 4. So, if all this does lead to Huggy joining forces with us, it's almost certain that the prototype won't let it slide. This could lead to an emotional moment where, after spending much of Chapter 5 navigating through the halls of Playtime Co. alongside Huggy, the prototype intervenes, ruthlessly killing him and dragging his corpse away. And you'd think a moment like this would be fairly overdue, as nearly every previous antagonist has met a similarly gruesome fate. However, we would still need to take a step back and answer a crucial question: what would Huggy's motivation be for helping us in particular? One possibility is that he saw us planting explosives during Chapter 4 as part of Poppy's plan to destroy the prototype. Given Huggy's stalker-like tendencies, it's not unlikely that he's been observing our actions this whole time, just like the Doctor when you think about it. Another possibility is that Kissy Missy already filled him in with everything he needs to know. She could have met up with him shortly after her attack and explained the situation, letting him know that the player character can be trusted, utilizing whatever type of method mute toys like themselves use to communicate. Perhaps we'll reunite with Kissy in Chapter 5 with Huggy already being by our side. The dynamic between these two could even play a role in gameplay. We might end up needing their help to solve certain puzzles, and if Chapter 5 is the final installment, Huggy Wuggy may meet his ultimate fate by sacrificing himself to ensure we succeed in taking down the prototype. This idea may sound crazy, but let's not forget, Huggy was once completely obedient to the Playtime Co. scientists.
Huggy Wuggy remains the optimal outcome due to his sufficient intelligence paired with maximum obedience. End of log.
This proves that Huggy isn't just a mindless monster driven by pure aggression. He's capable of following instructions, meaning he's also capable of change. Now, some may argue that Huggy won't be in Chapter 5 at all, pointing out that we saw the hallucinogenic red smoke fill the room just before Chapter 4's conclusion. However, that smoke only started emerging after Huggy was already seen outside the door, so that argument doesn't quite hold up. Whether or not these theories turn out to be correct, though, one thing is certain. After countless teases and even a hallucination form, Huggy Wuggy is back, watching and waiting patiently for his turn and a warm welcome. Let me know how you think Huggy will appear in Chapter 5 down in the comments. As always, thanks for watching and subscribe.